Hey, welcome to 1500ESPN.com. My name is Andrew Krammer. I want to thank you for joining me as we go over the three keys for the Minnesota Vikings this week against the Detroit Lions. We're going to do this every week, give you a primer video on what to watch for as the Minnesota Vikings try to bounce back from last week, which was a 20-3 debacle to the San Francisco 49ers, in which they allowed 230 rushing yards and 5 sacks. That leads us to our first key, and communication along the offensive line is going to be absolutely key for an offensive line that is without John Sullivan, and that you could tell that absolutely had an impact on the pressures and the unchecked blitzes that were allowed by the San Francisco 49ers. I think 4 of the 5 sacks on Teddy Bridgewater on Monday night came from extra pressure, and 3 of those were from completely untouched defenders. And that goes to show that John Sullivan's absence definitely had an impact on being able to pick up those blitzes. Joe Berger, as good as he is as a backup, his last start at center was in 2011 before Monday night. You could tell there was some growing pains there, and Teddy Bridgewater, I'm assuming Teddy Bridgewater, this is speculation, that he was so used to having John Sullivan make those kinds of reads for him that he didn't step in and make those checks when he should have. And the coaching staff said as much, saying Teddy's the one who needs to, the buck stops with him, he needs to go ahead and make those kinds of checks. So it's 6 people from the 5 on the offensive line and the quarterback that need to be on the same page and making sure they have everybody picked up from a Detroit Lions front that can get after the quarterback. They don't have Ndamukong Suh, they don't have Nick Fairley, but they have Elodi Nada, Ziggy Ansah, Jason Jones. They have a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback and stop the run. And if Teddy Bridgewater wants to take advantage of a secondary that gave up 400 yards to Phillip Rivers last week, Teddy needs to be able to be upright and needs to be able to deliver the ball with confidence without being tentative like he was last week, and actually having time and the presence of mind and composure to go ahead and do that. That starts without getting hit on the first play like he did last week, and being able to take advantage of any kind of openings he sees in that secondary. So communication is number 1 for that offensive line and deciphering the Detroit's pass rush. Number 2, each side of the running game. Adrian Peterson needs to get going. He said today that he trusts Norv Turner even though he only got 10 carries in his debut. He had 13 touches, which was amounting to about a quarter of the offense. But if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you didn't go through everything you did in the offseason to just give him a quarter of the offense. He has got to be the head of this. Norv Turner wants to be a balanced attack. He wants to throw to set up the run and run to set up the throw. But Adrian Peterson has to be the guy to get going right away, not just to build up his own confidence and build up his own strength. Because remember now, this has been a full year since he had been through anything. He didn't miss a single, or he didn't break a single tackle against the San Francisco 49ers, and that's absolutely unlike Adrian Peterson. I believe there are some growing pains for Adrian to get back into it, like anybody who's sat out doing any kind of physical activity for an entire year. Because remember now, Adrian didn't play in the preseason, and he doesn't get tackled in practice. So there definitely are some growing pains when it comes to just being able to shed tacklers, and I believe Adrian will definitely get back to form. He needs those opportunities, though, meaning Norv Turner needs to give him the ball, needs to feed the beast, and I believe they're going to do that in Detroit, against Detroit on Sunday, in more than just those 10 carries for 31 yards that he had against San Francisco. On the flip side, the Vikings could not stop Carlos Hyde. He had 168 rushing yards, which was a career high for him by 110 yards. It's not like Carlos has a great back, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't some superstar like that just came in and was expected to run over everybody. The Vikings could not bring him down. They couldn't seal the edges, and now they're going up against a Detroit offense. Even though Matthew Stafford's not the mobile quarterback that Colin Kaepernick is, they still have a trio of running backs that can take advantage of a defense in Amir Abdullah, a rookie who took his first touch for a 24-yard touchdown last week, Joique Bell, a proven truck, and then obviously another rookie in Zach Zenner, who impressed in the preseason. So they can bring a 3-headed monster at this Vikings defense, and believe me, they watched that tape in San Francisco and said, we're going to attack this defense, and run the ball at them. So key number 2, establish the run and stop the run. That is absolutely something they need to do and turn around. Otherwise, it's going to be another long day for the Minnesota Vikings. And number 3, you might see Xavier Rhodes shadow Calvin Johnson. Mike Zimmer's not going to say it. He didn't say it. I asked him today. He said, I doubt it, but we'll see. But the only game that the Vikings played against Calvin Johnson last year, Xavier Rhodes shadowed Calvin every single snap. He had 4 catches for 53 yards, which is absolutely a down game for a guy like Calvin Johnson. And the Vikings, even though they added Trey Waynes and they added Terence Newman, Trey is still not ready to start. I don't expect him to play at all. And Terence Newman is as solid as he is, as smart and intellectual as he brings to this defense. He is not physically fit, in my opinion, to go ahead and be on Calvin Johnson. Because if you're Detroit and you see Xavier staying on the left side, you're probably just going to put Calvin Johnson on the right every single time. Now, with that said, Detroit still boasts one of the best tandems in the league, and that whoever you put on Calvin, the other person has to cover Golden Tate. That's not going to be easy either. So I could see it go either way. I don't take the coach's word for it that they're not going to shadow Calvin Johnson, but it could go either way. They certainly couldn't. Calvin, I believe, only had a couple catches last week, and Detroit wants to get him more involved. So to recap, the third key is definitely to see if Xavier Rhodes goes ahead and shadows Calvin like they did in that Week 15 matchup last year. So to recap, we're going to go ahead and see communication along the offensive line. They need to improve that. They need to establish their own running game while stopping the opponent's running game. And the third key is you need to be able to contain Calvin Johnson. They're really only big playmaker for that Detroit Lions offense. So I want to thank you guys for joining me here at 1500ESPN.com. My name is Andrew Krammer. Thanks again.